Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Content Content, the late night show, 7 p.m. as compared to our 8 a.m. Sunday shows. It's very, very late. I always say I'm way past my bedtime at this time. Joining me this evening is dear friend, comedian, photographer, extraordinaire artist, extraordinaire, Maxim Allen. Maxim, thank you for joining us this evening.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I was stoked that you asked me. I was like, yes. And then someone else asked me to be on their podcast tomorrow. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be famous.
I can guarantee at least 3 movie deals after this appearance. So expect your. No, I was very thankful that you reached out to me. Well, first off, actually, originally I had shouted out your podcast, which for anyone listening, Don't Quit Your Day Job, which is your wonderful podcast, of course, that I've listened to many episodes of. When did you start doing that?
Thanks for tuning in, first of all. Really appreciate it. I think I started it last August. I think that was my first episode.
So technically a pre-quarantine, or are we talking mid-quarantine?
This is like a mid-quarantine edition. Okay. Yeah.
It is weird how, we'll get into this too, but it's weird how like everybody had to do something online. To me, it's been like an interesting, I keep saying that like, it's like everybody went to like sleepaway camp, you know?
Yeah.
So everybody had like a project that they needed to work on or whatever.
Yeah.
In any event, man, Maxim, I met you through my open mic there, Cherry Bomb. I was always very happy to have you. You're a goofy comedian, which is my favorite type of comedian.
That's so nice of you to say. I'm like in this crisis where I'm like, what kind of comedian am I? And I think goofy is a good word for it.
Well, far be it from me to pigeonhole you, sir. You could be whatever you like, of course. But I was always happy when you were on board.
I loved your mic.
Show.
And like our mic, like we were like, we want the vibe to be like Cherry Bomb because it was so much fun.
Thank you, man. And it's just like, and I gather that, and I understand, not to get into this too much, but it's like, I understand people just run mics and they don't care about them, you know? But I just thought, like, what if you cared about it just a little bit, you know? And you just like had some level of professionalism to the thing.
Totally.
And you know what? Honestly, there was a mic in Williamsburg called Slick that was run by Alexa Tamchuk, and some other folks who I met, and I stole their model because they actually like really cared about it. And so we're just passing it along.
You stole the concept of having fun and being nice from them.
Yeah, I did. I had never done that before in my whole life.
Wow, these comedians are laughing and smiling.
Oh
weird.
My gosh. Well, I guess we could try that. It probably
something in the water here.
All right, man. So as always, the point of content really is what we're trying to do is like, in the American materialist obsessed world, we have, for a great many reasons, largely gotten rid of religion and stuff like that. However, there are still, it seems to me we are reaching the limits of this hedonistic lifestyle that began, let's say, in the 60s and 70s. That's where we've blown out all the lines. You can stay home and curse and jerk off to porn all day if you want to. And we've all done it, and you find at the end that's kind of there's something hollow about that as well. It's maybe not everything that your grandma told you it wouldn't be. So there's some aspect to spirituality, to religion, that is worth holding on to, because there is something more to this life. So first question that I always like to start off with, man, is what is your like spiritual or religious background?
Okay, so like my background is, I would describe it as I grew up loosely Catholic. Like,
agreed.
Like, okay, so my mom, her family is all Polish immigrants, and they were very Catholic. They were like really into it, and like, I mean, they never let it control their lives, but they're very devout, church every Sunday, you know. Then when I was brought up when I was a kid, we would go to church like once in a while, you know, maybe once a month. And then there was a period where we went to like a once a week after school kind of church thing for some extra religious education, but that kind of went away. And my dad was not religious pretty much at all. And I remember asking him when I was probably like 5 or 6. I was like, Dad, why don't you come to church with us? And he said this is something that was actually like very poignant and like impacted my own spiritual development, like when in hindsight. But he just said, the mountains are my church. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Because I mean,
pretty cool.
What he probably meant was like, I'd rather just spend my Sunday going for a morning hike than like going and sitting in church. But like, there's like layers to that. I don't know if he intended for it to be deep, but it kind of was.
That is quite a spiritual thing to say, I should think.
Yeah, very much so.
It's funny you say that, man, because I feel like that is a typical, I mean, I don't mean to like graft my experience onto our generation entirely, but like I basically have a similar thing where like my grandparents, Catholic, church every Sunday. My parents like went to Catholic school growing up. And then when they became adults, they were like, this is like devoid of meaning and I don't really get it. So yeah, I went to church on Easter a couple times. And so I feel like that puts our generation, at least in America, in a unique position where I don't really have a whole lot of, I don't have a whole lot of history tied to like the teachings of Catholicism necessarily. So I don't have like, I didn't have my hands like whipped by a nun, you know what I mean? No, yeah. So I don't have those like negative associations.
Yeah.
With the thing that you went to like after school, because I'm always interested, like, do you feel like you gleaned any actual kind of like religious knowledge that was like applicable to your life at that time? Because I wonder if that's even possible for like a kid to understand, like not just the literal stories of Jesus, be they true or not, but like the actual meaning, the parable that it's the myth that it's trying to tell you or whatever.
Right. I don't think I did. I don't think I got anything out of it except for now as an adult, when another comedian makes a joke about being Catholic, sometimes I get the minutia and I'm like, oh, nice. Okay, so this like whole Catholic thing like kind of went away after a while. Like basically my parents got divorced and my mom, like she was going through it. We were very poor. My mom was drinking a lot and stuff, and she didn't feel at home in the Catholic Church anymore, and she started like branching out into like other like forms of Christianity, basically. Like now my mom is what I would consider more of like a spiritual Christian. That just like, it's not tied to like any like particular sect or anything like that, but she's like Christian, but she's very chill about it. But at that time, I remember going to my first like non-denominational mega church with her from Catholic church, just like, all right, I'll go check it out.
Sure.
And these people were like having fun. They were playing they had a band and they were like singing and dancing and they were happy to be there. And I remember being like so annoyed because I was like, this is not how you do religion. All right. Religion is you stand, you sit, you kneel, you suffer for 1 hour and you go home, and that's religion.
Dare they?
And that was something that like was interesting to me because like Catholicism is so ritualistic in how the knowledge is conveyed that like when I kind of would go to like these non-denominational churches once in a while with my mom, it was like, oh, weird. So this is like the same, like they're trying to convey the same morals, but everything about it is completely different. But even at that time, I wasn't picking up the morals of it. I was like 14 or 15, you know?
Right.
I don't know. I think one thing that my mom and I talk about is people we know who are very like what we call legalistic, where they go to church and they are involved in their church community and hyper religious, but the way they act and behave in their daily life, it's like, so you are ultra pious, but you clearly haven't gotten the message of what you're going for here. I don't know if you've ever met people like that. I mean, we had a whole election about it. Twice.
That's true. I heard something about that. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny, man. Like the past couple of weeks too, my girlfriend and I have been checking out like the St. Patrick's Mass that's like broadcast online and stuff. and again, like I don't have any real like strong memories or feelings about like a church service other than what you are saying, which is like it seems to me like in a lot of ways it is devoid of like all that's left is the ritual
Right.
of like first we do this kind of reading, then we say this thing, then we kneel, then we say this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in some ways that can be like comforting to people who have done it for a long time, especially. But I wonder if like a church service is maybe more should be more like ecstatic, like
Absolutely.
like saying,
Absolutely. I think they should be getting up there and they should be teaching you what all the weird symbols on the walls are. Like they should be like, all right, like let's just have a Q&A day for Catholics or something. Like
yeah, exactly. I look at this person, Obtuse said in Mormon upbringing, it was 3 to 4 hours of suffering.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, that's a long church service, Actually, it makes me think of I think it's the Quakers. This is an interesting way to do church. I could be wrong about this, but it's one of those types of groups where their church service is everybody from the town comes and sits down and they all sit in silence unless somebody feels like compelled to say something.
Whoa.
So there are technically, I think, services that you just sit there in total silence, which, I mean, I don't take any time to do that in my actual life.
Yeah.
I never sit there for an hour in complete silence, just be contemplative.
That's like only an activity that people we know would do if they were all taking acid with friends. They're like, one of them is like, hey guys, what if we sat in silence until we had to say something?
Well, dude, if that's how you want to do it, I'm down. That's all I'm saying.
I do. Where'd you grow up? What part of the country are you from?
I am from Albany, New York.
Okay.
So just like a suburbs kind of kid.
Yeah. So I want to tag on the chat comment about Mormonism too. Like I grew up in like Colorado, which has a large Mormon population.
Yes.
And these poor kids, man, they had to get up before high school every day and go to like a 2-hour seminary class before school even started.
Damn.
And one of my high school friends was dating a Mormon girl, and she made him come to seminary with her, and he wasn't even Mormon.
Oh, dude, the things you do to get laid. Oh man.
I know, right? And it's like that's not gonna happen, bud. Like,
yeah, no, true. As a
still going to seminary, like,
and that's another thing, man. I mean, like, yeah, to the extent that, like, can you actually be under the age of 16 and glean any like level of true kind of spirituality? I don't know. And it seems to me if you are a kid who's living a otherwise like regular American life where you're going to high school and stuff like that, having a 2-hour church service in the morning, it seems to me would only really make you want to run away from that stuff.
Yeah. And they're not allowed to have caffeine either. So it's not like they can have a cup of coffee while sitting there.
My God, these people are nuts. No, but of course, obviously, it's very indoctrinating too. So I certainly understand how somebody could be pulled into that.
I think it's the ritual and like the repetition, even if you don't glean anything from it when you're young, I think the intention is, if you're an adult who's done this their whole life, if you have an existential problem, you know where to go for answers. Even if you've never gotten any wisdom from it in the past necessarily, you can like be like, okay, well, I have a large library of reference material that I could probably find some meaning in. I
think that's a fantastic point, man. And I think maybe that's one of the things we might be kind of missing in modern life nowadays. Is we feel like everything's a giant mistake and we have absolutely no answers to anything.
Hell yeah.
Which is a scary place to be. And of course, we've all been there. But it's funny. I keep bringing this up, but in the like sermon on Sunday, and I'm not a Catholic either. I'm not devoted to any one religion. I think spirituality in and of itself is an incredibly individualized kind of thing, which is why I like talking to various people about, well, how do you make sense of this whole goddamn world, But Cardinal Dolan, who's a sketchy figure, but he was saying how, something like the 10 Commandments is at least like a framework with which to live your life. It's like some set of boundaries. It makes me think of like something like a sport like basketball. Like, well, Michael Jordan wasn't the best at basketball because he invented a bunch of new rules, and he like did, like within the framework of the game, he was the best at doing that thing.
Right.
And yeah, I could see how somebody could benefit from having some kind of like reference point of. Now, of course, where that reference point is coming from and what it is and what they're telling you to do is a whole other kind of, a questionable kind of thing.
Yeah.
But so where are you at like nowadays, man? What do you think? Are you a devout atheist? Do you think there's something maybe a little more? Do you have a conception of what God is, even generally or specifically?
I definitely, I wouldn't call myself an atheist. This is about to get so heady, and I'm so sorry.
That's what the show is, my friend.
But like, I went through this phase. Okay, I grew up Catholic, like loosely Catholic, and then my mom starts going to non-denominational churches, and that's like early high school for me. And then I started getting like into like really heavy music. Like I'm a huge metalhead.
Really?
And a lot of that kind of challenged my like beliefs, and like not necessarily like my beliefs about like what's in the universe and what everything is about, but a lot of heavier music is a criticism of church doctrine and like political doctrine. And I also have like massive authority issues. So
I won't try to tell you what to do throughout the course of this.
So I kind of resented church and like the concept of God for like a while. My family was also going through like a hard time and stuff, but like after a couple years, like early college, I kind of started like rebuilding like my identity as like a spiritual person and like what I actually thought to be true. And this is also about the same time that I was doing like a lot of quote unquote research about aliens. And
I don't say quote unquote, I say very strict scientific research.
Yeah, exactly. So I was getting really into aliens. And when you read about aliens a lot, you get into lots of like weird people who have crazy ideas about how the universe works. A lot of new agey stuff. Just it's all over the place, right and left. And I think after like reading so much of this stuff, just like super trippy, like I kind of narrowed it down to what I actually think is going on. And in my mind, I think everything that has ever existed and will ever exist in any type of dimension or universe, multiverse, whatever, everything that could ever be is like one ultimate consciousness. And we are all part of it, even though we think we're separate from it, from each other rather, and from like the God, which is all of us. Like, I guess in like a visual way, what I always think about is if you had like a big ball of clay and you like pulled up little human figures on it, like, but we're still attached to the ball of clay and each other. And it's kind of like this thing where I believe everything has some form of consciousness like flowing through it. And it's like bigger or smaller depending on like, what kind of creatures we are, how long we've lived, have we been reincarnated. I think we're all just a piece of the universe. And I think fundamentally, like the concept of like God or like a top level being, I think is the fact that we as like an individual, we have thoughts and we have needs and we have worries and stuff. And that gets transmitted through literally everything that isn't us. So it's kind of like a reactive system where it's like you could like you pray and you're like, I really need a promotion, like it's gonna make or break me, like I need this to happen or I need a better option. And then that kind of thought goes back through like your mind and your consciousness out into the universe. And then every other person, every other being, everything out there responds to that because it's still part of you. It's like, I don't know. It's like you live in the Matrix and you are the Matrix at the same time, in my mind.
I happen to agree with all of that, man. And not only do I think it's heady, I think it's pretty eloquent.
I was hoping I explained that well enough.
I think you did, man. And what I often say is like people. There's a like a Christian monk guy named Thomas Merton who I really like, and he there's a quote of his that says, most people's conception of God is too narrow, it's too small.
Yeah.
And what he means, I think, is like, the lifeguard God who's yelling at people and stuff.
Yeah.
It's always like watching you. It's
I love that
creepy.
lifeguard God. That's good.
Yeah. Get stop doing that. Stop jerking off so much.
I was a lifeguard. I feel him. I relate to him.
Did you feel a certain power while you're up there?
Oh, yeah. You have no idea.
Yeah. Now, did you do the sunscreen on your nose?
Nah, indoor pool. So.
Oh, yes, or no need. Yeah. Okay, fair.
Anyway, sorry to interrupt. You were talking about the monk.
And yeah, what I think God is what the common conception of the universe. When people say, "Oh, the universe spoke to me," or "I don't know, the universe was giving me a sign," I don't know. I think all of it, all the stuff, that's what God is. This giant oneness, which I think is what you're saying. Yeah. And it's super interesting how you say, like, because there's another. I think it's like something Jesus said where, like, do not judge lest you will be judged in the same manner. And sometimes I think that, like, the problems that we have with somebody else, they meet somebody and they like bother you in a certain way. It's because you see that in yourself and you're like, I'm not like that. No, I don't want to be like that. So you get mad at that person about that thing. I think it's that, like, personal. It's that interrelated.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And yeah, like you said, like, I think of it as this big giant supercomputer where, because the great debate, of course, is, well, is it all determined or do we have free will? And I think it's both. Yeah. And I think it's like the computer presents you with a couple options and then you pick one and then it takes that choice that you made and it recalculates the whole thing and then it gives you some more options and then you pick one. So to that extent, I definitely agree with you that, like, almost everything is a reflection of your own like viewpoint or your own consciousness, I guess. Yeah. I'm reading this book right now. Another guest that we had on, this guy David DeAndre, who's a former like missionary who, like, kind of, he went to the Ukraine. He was a missionary and then, like, gave up everything. Was like, oh my gosh, and now he's like a nice spiritual person. He told me about this book called The Seth Material. This lady Jane Roberts in the 60s basically, like, was a medium. That's very new agey, and I don't know how much to believe. I just think it's fascinating. Yeah. And so she had this, like, entity called Seth, like, speak through her over like a period of years. I love
the channeled stuff, by the way.
Oh, it's fantastic!
It's so cool.
Phenomenal. Yeah. Like I said, whether or not it's the absolute truth, I just think it's, like, fascinating to at least entertain. And I also think one thing about, like, the American materialist obsessed life is we have removed all of the magic of life. Yes.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Which is a shame. That's like it's really, like, really a big bummer to me. But one of the things that this entity Seth said, and it's one of those things where it's so many. There's so many explanations, and I'm like, how could they make all this stuff up? I mean, there's a lot of very in-depth descriptions of things. I'm like, oh my goodness. But he's saying that we basically create our own realities wherever we are, so that, like, we agree because we agree on so many things because of the way we're brought up, and there are physical things. I'm sitting in front of a desk. But, like, if you and I walk down a street and you're hungry and I'm not, you're noticing all the restaurants and I'm not really noticing them. Yeah. But we walk down the same street. And, like, if you had to draw the entire street that you live on right now, would you be able to draw every single house? It's like, I don't really.
No. I, like, in my mind, I live around the corner from a Chinese restaurant and a roti shop. And I think we're like the 8th building on our row, but I've never counted because in my mind, I just am the one that's right around the corner.
And to that extent, we really do live in, like, each of our own realities.
I totally agree. And I think one thing that is very similar to that is like the holographic universe. Have you read that one?
No.
It's very cool. It's basically like the universe is a hologram. All the information of all of it is stored in every piece of it. So it's like you have like the infinite capacity to do everything. And like, hang on, let me rephrase. So when you said like the computer presents you with choices, basically, the way I see it and the way it kind of works in my mind, and with that is you also pick the choices. Like you generate the choices for yourself.
Yeah.
And it's like a subconscious thing. But I do agree that like we create the universe around us. And one thing that I really believe in is the space you are in is your mind. And I think that's like, it's like very physical in a lot of ways, but it has very like emotional and spiritual ramifications. And it's something I really noticed moving from like Boulder, Colorado to Brooklyn, New York. Is like when you spend your time like out in the like nature, and you're hiking mountains and you have vast sky and sunshine, and you can be alone with like the silence and the wind, you tend to think like in like a broader scale and be more at peace. Whereas when I go to like when I moved to Brooklyn, suddenly I felt very tight and very much in a maze and very hyper aware of like the material reality of things, and not so much like I feel more, I guess I feel more observed in like a quantum state, you know? Like if you're unobserved, that's where the magic happens. And if you're observed, everyone's kind of agreeing on this reality. So one of my favorite things ever is I love the desert. Like I love the Southwest. I love just like the emptiness, because when you're out there, you create your own reality and there's no one else there to dispute it. And so like, I think that's why like there's so much spirituality that kind of occurs in that like region, is because like you have two people living on a farm, and there's not even a farm, just a house in some dust, and there's no one around for 50 miles. They can see aliens, they could see a werewolf, they can see whatever they want. And if they both agree that they want to see it, like they'll be able to see it. So it's like that element of magic like comes from like this like loneliness. And then when you come to a place like tons of people, everyone is watching every inch of everything all the time. So it feels like nothing moves and nothing can surprise you except other people.
Wow, that's another brilliant thing, man. So interesting what you say about like the Southwest, because that is where a lot of alien sightings are.
Absolutely.
And you know, we talk on the show a lot about like what the placebo effect exactly is, and what exactly like faith means, and what's the difference between like if those people out in the Southwest saw an alien one night. There's no point in anyone trying to tell them, no, you didn't. That doesn't happen. Because to them, in their reality, that happened. And so whether you want to dig into the science of whether the flying saucer can't travel through the speed of light, through the whatever, like that doesn't change their experience.
Right. I totally agree. And like one thing that actually kind of turned me on to like the aliens, like the new agey stuff, is I was kind of like in like an existential place, like my like freshman year of college. And I was like, just like, what's going on? And then I realized like, I had this thought that was like, it doesn't actually hurt me to believe the universe might be more magical than we're told. So it's like, and then I got this thought of like, okay, well, every person I know has a story that everyone goes, oh no, that didn't happen. Like everyone has a story that no one else believes. Then it's like, well, what if all those things, what kind of reality would we be living in if all those things could be simultaneously true? If everyone's nutso story can exist in the same timeline, what would the nature of the universe be? Because it's not like I've seen a werewolf. I might have seen a ghost one time. Like it's and it's like, it's not like we're living in like the Underworld trilogy. We're not having some vampire werewolf war like for mankind.
Not yet.
But I think it's this like where your mind is at, like echoes through the universe around you. And I think one thing you hear from people who've done like a lot of drugs, like the not good ones, like heavy drugs, is they
Yes.
see shadow people. Like the
That
shadow
is like a
people.
well-documented thing, right?
Yeah. And it's like their presence, like to us, like if we were like walking at night, like let's say like really tired walking home, like falling asleep walking type, we might see a shadow person or two. But like people who are on heavy drugs see shadow people like everywhere. And I think it's part of this like disintegrating of your like emotional and spiritual state that like connects you to the material world, that it kind of blurs the lines between like what's here and what's just weird lurking energy.
I believe that, man. And yeah, it's almost like, and also, I mean, even in just taking some psychedelics, that you can make an argument that like you're kind of, again, it's tough to talk about some new agey things without seeming like, ooh, but whatever.
Yeah.
That you're kind of like outside of your consciousness, or you're kind of in like a different, I don't want to say dimension, but jumping back, like when you said, because I do agree that, but I've only recently considered this, that like we kind of create our world with our mind. So to that extent, do you believe that we are here to do work? Are we here because we have certain things we're supposed to work through? Like why does our mind create the world that it does?
I don't think there's necessarily like a hard and fast reason for it. I don't think we're here to work. I think like our consciousness evolved because of the comforts of life. Like we would have always been in an animal state if we were never able to farm enough food for us to relax for a week straight. Like if we were still in our animal state, we wouldn't have the time to worry about these things. We'd just be part of this like meat grinder maelstrom of like the natural world. And we wouldn't be worrying about it. But we were like, oh guys, we can start a farm. Oh, and if we have a farm, we can work during the day and we can just chillax all weekend. Like, and it's fine.
Yeah.
And then through that comes like, oh, now we have new problems like social hierarchy and the haves and the have-nots. And I think we let our materialism just totally just hit the ground running, and we left our spiritual development somewhere in the 1800s. Like I think
that's about as far as we made it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think we matched up. And I think one thing that happens to a lot of people like our age who, like, you hear this all the time, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual.
Yes.
And it's because everyone has realized that the institution of religion sucks.
Yes.
But everyone wants an answer to something. And I'm attached to the idea of like karma, and like I believe in like this is actually something I read in like a channeled book, like another one of these ones.
Which one was it? Do you remember?
It's called The Law of One by Ra, like the Egyptian Ra. Like
Dude,
and the whole thing is that there is no duality. There's no good and evil. The highest level thing is a oneness. And within that oneness, like you can separate your energy into like, if we're all part of the same universe, if we're all the same consciousness, when I do something good for you, like if I do you a favor, bring you a present, or help you out in some way, that's also doing good for me because we're both made of the same conscious material. Conversely, I can take actions that only serve me and they are beneficial for everyone. So if I like rape and pillage and conquer half the planet, I have served myself. And because I am part of the infinite universe, I have still served the universe. And neither of these things has any moral separation from the other one. It's just like they're the same morally, but they're just two different directions of like your energy flow. And I kind of think that's what the karma kind of cycles are. But also that's like, I get that, I subscribe to it, but I don't know why we're here doing this.
Well, that's the thing too. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that's the answer that everybody wants. Like, why is this happening? What's the deal with this? but we couldn't. That's the answer we can't have, because
Right.
in order to completely understand it, we would be God. Like
Yeah.
we're too much an ingredient in the pie to be able to stand back and like understand it completely.
Mhm.
So, but when you're saying like if you're going to be Genghis Khan
Yeah.
or Napoleon,
Mhm.
like, are you saying that's the same as being compassionate, or like because that would be that person's role in the universe?
I don't think it is personally, but that's what this explanation was, where it's like you can give or you can take, and they're the same at the end because you've ultimately like provided more for a piece of the universe in a weird way. Like you've actualized something into the universe. It's like, but it's like the ends don't justify the means for everybody. The means are what people get to decide. It's the ends that is going to be, you want to be the same. But
Yeah,
I also think it's like you descend through like levels of that. I think in the scope of like reincarnation with that, I think if you're someone who gives energy outward to lots of people, when you die, you probably go someplace where it's like easier to do that, or it's like a world of those people. And if you're really good at taking from everyone, I think you descend into a level where it's more competition with other people like that. Like one thing, this is crazy. Okay, I don't know if you listen to true crime podcasts at all.
I've dabbled, yes.
Okay, so one thing that I have noticed with serial killers and like huge mass murderers is a lot of these dudes, when they give reasons for doing it or they write something in their manifesto, a lot of times they'll say something like, all the people I've killed will be my slaves in the next life. And someone told me this, or some entity told me this. And it's weird because I've heard that like 20 times in like from different killers and stuff. And I'm like, is this like part of like a descent? Like, are they choosing like, oh, I want to be in a world where we all like rape and murder each other all the time, but I want, when I get there, I want to be really good at it. So I'm like, I can thrive in this. And conversely, it's like we have people who are like so like, have you seen The Good Place?
That's Ted Danson.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This show, like, I mean, everyone's probably watched The Good Place, but if you're looking for some good afterlife, wholesome comedy, watch The Good Place.
That's the place to go, yeah.
But yeah, I think it's like that, where it's like you have these people who want to do the best they can in life and provide for other people and just give and give and give. And I think because they want to get, like, a lot of times givers don't necessarily feel comfortable asking for things. They just wish everyone gave all the time, so then no one had to ask for things ever. But they'll just keep giving until someone is like, hey, do you actually want a cake too? And they're like, oh my God, that'd be lovely. Like,
I thought you'd never ask.
Yeah. And then those people can all go up to the next ring where like that's a thing, and everyone does bake each other cakes, you know? I don't know.
Well, so because I agree with you to the extent that like I think it's another one of those things where oftentimes I think people, myself included, have difficulty with like this inevitable suffering of life. Mm-hmm. Because it's this thought of like, why me? Like, yeah, I'm a pretty good guy. Like, why does this have to happen to me? And of course, it's because it has, in so many cases, absolutely nothing to do with you. And there are a million different things flying around that you have absolutely no control over. Mm-hmm. And so it's a similar thing where we can't stand far back away from it enough to see the totality of the picture to understand, well, this needed to happen, so this would happen, so this would happen.
Right.
Or not that it needed to happen, but look, this is just how it happened. Mm-hmm. So again, our consciousness is too narrow to kind of understand that. But so what do you make then of like morality generally? Like, do you think it is better to put positivity into the universe so that you will be reincarnated into a world that is more positive? Do you think that's worth it? Or do you think we don't really have much control over that? We kind of like do the things that we're going to do and we're just like on the karmic ride?
I think I think we're all kind of individually like on the karmic ride. I think it like morality is I think morality is also something you kind of grow through and you change your concept of morality as you get older and you struggle more and stuff. And I think there were okay. So there have you heard of the Shakers?
It's so funny you mentioned that, man. I went to Shaker High School
Whoa.
because in Albany was like the big Shaker outpost. Now,
That's
that being
tight.
said, it's very tight. That being said, I don't know much about the Shakers other than that they're, I believe, an offshoot of the Quakers, and
Yeah.
that they were so strict about not having sex that they didn't reproduce and they died off, I think.
Yeah. They were like a hyper progressive Quaker, but
Yeah.
like their whole thing was just they lived in these communes and they believed that every act of service was a way to was like a prayer to God. And so they just they lived in these like co-ed communes and they did work and they were just fine with it all day because in their mind they were like, oh yeah, all we need to do, like I call this the monkey body. Like you have your consciousness and then this is like the monkey body. Like your monkey body needs to eat and sleep and it needs to like go to college so it can eat and sleep better or whatever, you know.
So they say.
Yeah, so they say. But I think like if you can find a way to have your monkey body accounted for and you can spend your time just in a positive meditative state, I think we would all be like a little happier. And I think so much of our world, like you mentioned earlier, the materialism is people are just always suffering because of completely man-made things.
True.
Like it would be better if people suffered like existentially. I'd rather us like be able to eat all the time and relax, and then going to work was like 1 hour a day. You have to go to a philosophy class and yell at each other or something. But I don't know. It's so weird that we're like, it's weird that we're even allowed to ponder this.
Yeah, true.
I think the only reason that we're allowed to, as like our like puny like human brains are allowed to comprehend like ponder this stuff, is because somewhere up the food chain something else knows it's like they're never gonna figure it out, you know. Like
I know, it's like if there are aliens, you know, there are at least some of them who are looking at Earth like, I'm not going there. Those idiots are gonna blow that thing up before they know it. They don't know what they're doing with any of that stuff.
Yeah, and also I got really into like reading about alien abductions and stuff, and the spiritual component of like alien abductions and like UFO sightings is massive. Like to the point where like aliens will take people and they will tell people that your species is not spiritually developed enough for faster than light travel. Like if you guys were spiritually developed enough, you could have post scarcity. Like you could do whatever you wanted to and you could explore the universe, but you guys cannot get it together. And that has happened hundreds of times with like, I don't know. So I think there's something to that. I think I'm
so too, man.
I'm so
you figure at some point we take the message, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I am like like in a nutshell, my like spiritual like reality would just be like Star Trek: The Next Generation. Like that is just completely what it's all based on. Like
it makes a lot of sense, I gotta say, man.
Yeah.
And you know what? Like it is interesting because it's of course true that like so much of the modern American suffering is just things that we bring upon ourselves. And, you know, we live in a very individualized and very self-conscious time.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, especially being in New York City, it feels like everything you're doing is always being watched. And so everybody now, especially with like the internet and everybody wants to go viral, everybody has a kind of like performative aspect to their personality, which is probably not good. But to the extent of like whether you should put positivity or negativity into the universe, or whether you should, it makes me think of in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is at the Battle of Kurukshetra, and across the way is like his uncles, and he like puts his weapons down. He's like, I'm not gonna kill those people. And Krishna says to him like, this is your role. Like, you got to do it. And so on the surface level, you're like, wait, no, that's bad. He's gonna kill him. But they did terrible things, and they've become his enemy, and this is where he's got to fulfill his role. And then, the first realization of the Buddha is that all life involves suffering. Being young is suffering, growing old is suffering. And so then the game of life is not trying to really change not really trying to optimize your experience, but rather like harmonizing with the things that are in your life. So there's a distinction to be made between like what your role is and what you're doing, and how you feel about it while it's happening.
Oh my God, that's so smart.
It was the Buddha who came up with that. I wish I could take credit for it.
I mean, it makes so much sense. It's like, it's the whole thing of like, this is like just gonna be like a comedy metaphor, but like when you feel bad about like being a comedian and you're like, I'm not as far ahead as I'd like to be, or am I ever gonna make it? Am I special? Am I something worth consuming on like a massive level? It's like, oh wait, I should just be enjoying the fact that I'm hanging out with people telling jokes, and I just am part of this great community.
I know it, man. I know, and yeah, when you look at it from that standpoint, it really is like a relief, because it's a double-edged sword being in the comedy community. It's a good example of a type of community where simultaneously, I'm so happy to be part of it because I've met the coolest people I've ever met in it. And yet, you like see somebody doing a thing, you're like, God, how does that person, like you can't help but have those impulses at times. Yeah. And yet there's another guy that I really like, George Gurdjieff, who's basically like a Russian Buddha. And he's alive in like the early 1900s. Another guy who has so many theories about insane things, deep levels of the universe. I'm like, I can't wrap my head around all of it. But, one of the things he says, like, if one thing could be different, then absolutely everything could be different. And that people are constantly under the impression that things aren't going correctly, when in fact they're unfolding the only way they could possibly unfold. So, to see somebody doing X, Y, and Z, don't just think about them doing that thing, but think about the totality of their experience. And man, that's their path. That's their journey. Yep. And you feeling a certain way about it will have absolutely no effect on their journey. And to that extent, and isn't it the case, this is another Alan Watts kind of thing, that life is not a race, but it's a song. So, we're constantly told that it's a race, that no, you have to get to this point and then everything will be fantastic. When in fact, when you hear 50-year-old comedians who are very wealthy and very popular, the stories that they inevitably tell on podcasts and stuff are like, well, I was on the road and I was like 22. I don't know what I was doing. And it's like they reflect on those days as being like, wow, I should have enjoyed those more.
Yeah, exactly.
And, and then it's all the Eckhart Tolle power of now, that the only thing that actually exists is the present. Another thing I was just reading in the Seth material, this entity Seth was saying that like the past can absolutely be changed, in the sense that the past only exists as like biochemicals in your brain. The past only exists to you how you choose or feel to perceive it. So something could happen to you in the present that changes the past in your own mind. So in that to that extent,
makes sense.
Like, the past is sense. The present also, right? It's like, time is a flat circle.
It's like the Mandela effect. It's exactly what it is. But I totally think the past can change. Like, I don't know if this actually happened or not, but I had a Mandela effect like jump like a week ago. Because my train station is Nostrand Avenue on the A and the C. Okay. And as long as I have lived here, there is only one entrance to this station, and it is on Nostrand Avenue. And I get off the train one day, and suddenly where there used to be a tile wall, there is another entrance to Bedford Avenue. And I was like, this was not here before. And I don't remember if maybe there was just like, maybe I'd never really fully paid attention to the wall at the end of the station. Maybe it was a temporary wall or something.
Maybe,
But
yeah.
it was like someone had just gone like Looney Tunes and like taken this wall and like drawn a separate like train station at the other end, where I was like, wait, that's here now? I don't know. And it really bothers me because it's not like there's anyone I can ask to be like, hey, did you guys just build like 2 new staircases and like 2 new like 200 square foot like areas? I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
I can't just go to the MTA and be like, hey, man, was this always there, or did this magically appear overnight?
That person would inevitably look at you like, just get the fuck out of here, man.
Yeah, exactly.
There's nobody to ask about that. Well, that leads me to another question, man, which is that, do you have in your life a moment or moments, have you had moments that you would consider like religious or spiritual? And I'm fascinated by people's answers to this question, because as leaning atheistic as our generation is, I think, very often people are like, well, but one time I had this thing, and I've definitely had experiences in my life, even if it's something that just like the new entrance to the subway, like it just didn't make sense.
Yeah.
Like, how did something so substantively meaningful just occur all of a sudden?
Yeah.
Do you have something that jumps to mind as an answer to that question?
Yeah, I think like the like biggest spiritual experience in my life, I talk about it on episode 19 of Don't Quit Your Day Job, where I interview my mom, and you can get the full unabridged version there. But basically, in a nutshell, we lost our home when I was in like 10th grade, like, because that was like 2009, like financial crisis.
Wow.
Like, so we lose our home. My mom is like working like 3 jobs, trying to keep it together. We're homeless for like 2 weeks, I think. And we're living in like an acquaintance's basement who didn't even really want us there. And at the end of the 2 weeks, I'm hanging out with my high school girlfriend. We had just been dating for like a week or something. And we go to see Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind. Aliens are not a part of this story, don't worry. And
I'm disappointed.
And we come back to her place. It's like 10 p.m. And my mom told me she would come pick me up. And I call my mom, and she doesn't answer. And then she calls me back. And she says, I say, hey, can you come and pick me up? And she goes, oh, can you stay there tonight? I've just been arrested with a DUI. And so she gets arrested for this DUI, okay? And then I have to tell this girl's parents, hey, guys, can I crash on the couch? Yeah. My mom just got arrested. My mom tells me this story. She blows the breathalyzer for the police officer. She was like very cooperative. The machine doesn't work. They go, can we take you to the station and blow again? We have a machine there. She goes, okay. It doesn't work. It doesn't work again. And it doesn't work enough times that within the 2-hour window that they're required by law to test you, she didn't blow anything. She absolutely was drinking and driving. And she got off scot-free on this DUI, basically. Nothing on her record. And she was like, that was amazing. That's the first thing that happens, okay? The next morning, I get picked up by my mom and one of our old neighbors who's a family friend now. And they bring us back to our neighbor's house. And our neighbor, the very like Christian woman at her Bible group, was telling her women's Bible group about the struggles that we were going through. And she was like, yeah, please pray for my friend Cindy. She's like, she's lost her home and all this stuff. And like, she just needs help right now. So pray for her or whatever. The next day, like when my mom picks us up and we stay at our friend's house, my mom gets a call. Our friend gave her a woman's number who basically came up to her after the Bible group and was like, tell Cindy to give me a call at this number. We end up calling her. Turns out this woman has a whole extra house for us that she let us live there for 3 months, rent free until we had to start paying rent, and then we could stay as long as we needed to, as long as we could pay rent. And my mom started her business at this time, and then that is the business she still has to this day, and we lived in that house for 10 years. And like my mom like swears this is like, oh no, my camera messed up. Can you still hear me okay?
I can still hear you, yes.
Okay. But my mom swears that this was like a God thing, because literally that night she dropped off me and my brother before she got the DUI, and she was like crying in her car, and she shouted at this Catholic church. She was like, "Where are you?" And then within a day, we had a full house to live in. Like, it was crazy. So that was like, that's where I think the feedback loop really came in my life. Like, it was a very unique experience.
There. That story was so spiritual, the FBI just shut it down.
Yeah, exactly.
Dude, I'll tell you.
So immediate. It was so crazy. And it came down to the goodness of a human being, but just the series of like lucky events to us being in a home. And then my mom starts her business, she quits drinking, and like our lives only get better from there. It's crazy.
That is wild, man. And you just, I mean, how else do you explain that to me, in my opinion, other than the universe was looking at your mom and you and was like, no, they're not supposed to experience that much suffering at this moment.
Exactly.
No, that's not supposed to happen.
You know, like full Shapiro on and be like, actually, it was the free market deciding, and a free market consumer decided to loan you guys their house until you started paying market value for their property. Yeah, the whole thing, it was so crazy. And just like having all this tragedy happen, and then just having like literally within 2 days, it was like, oh, you guys now have a whole house. It was unbelievable. And that was like a big moment. My mom was like always telling us when we were younger, she's like, it was a God thing. It was a God thing. And like, we were like, Mom, whatever. And then like, now that I'm like come around more, I'm like, yeah, it totally was. Like, there is, I don't know. It's just one of those like amazing stories. Like, it's crazy. And full details on episode 19 of Don't Quit Your Day Job, with all the gory divorce details, and the whole timeline is in there.
Oh, I mean, if that's not a teaser, guys, I mean, come on, don't quit your day job. That is such a wild story, man. And yeah, it's one of those things where there's so many, again, like the universe is so enormous, and there's so many moving pieces, and you guys losing your house has absolutely nothing to do with you, of course. It has to do with banker pricks who screwed the country. And then the obvious fallout from that and everything. And yeah, I really do interpret that as just the universe being like, no, they're not. That's not how it's supposed to happen right now.
Yeah.
And it's fortunate, obviously. And like, well, what do you make of that? Like, I guess. Well, let me ask you this: pulling back a little bit, like, what do you make of coincidences generally when they occur in life? Not that that's necessarily a coincidence. This is kind of like a different question. But do you interpret certain things as signs? Do you think the universe is showing you little things, even if it's not like an obvious thing, but you just kind of feel a certain way by seeing a certain thing? Do you believe in that kind of messaging or interpreting?
I definitely believe in like a law of attraction to some extent. And I think because you create the universe around you, and the space you're in changes your mind. Like, I think the way it works is when you read, like, you learn a word for the first time and you see it everywhere.
Yes.
It's because you've learned this new thing. It's like hot on your brain, like on your forehead. And so it's like got this like magnetic attraction to everything. And so I think a lot of times coincidence is just purely like based on like, people are kind of thinking like, it would be crazy if a coincidence happened, right? Like I had this weird coincidence though. This is like a series of them, okay? Where I had a friend, and this friend had another friend, and this friend had a boyfriend, and they kept telling, the two friends were like, "Oh my God, you have to meet this girl's boyfriend because you and him are so similar. You both like are into the same hobbies, you both love board games, you're kind of the same type of person. You guys have to hang out." And I'm like, I don't care. Like, I don't know him. I'm not even good friends with his girlfriend or anything like that. Like, I don't care. And then my friend and this girl, they end up like, let's go bowling. And they just like basically trapped me into hanging out with this dude so they could laugh at how similar we were.
Yeah.
And like the weird thing is when we met up, it was like, okay, yeah, we both like board games, kind of similar personality type, whatever. We were wearing the same shoes. We both made very compelling arguments to the other two about why tofu is a great food. And then we bowled the exact same score.
Really?
It was like, I think it was just because everyone had it on their mind. Like, these two are similar. Right. And then just the reality around it, like, warped to like make that like a reality.
I mean, the shoes thing is pretty weird, and then the same exact score. That's pretty nuts.
And it wasn't like the same exact shoe. It was the same brand of shoe, but the brand was a little niche. It was like Sanuk, which is like these weird kind of like hippie loafer looking things.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
it was one of those shoes where people roasted me. They're like, "Those are ugly as fuck." I'm like, "These are comfy. I don't care."
I think
like,
cool, man.
So not a lot of people would wear those, but that was really bizarre. But I think everything, like when I like really assessed my spirituality, I like came at it in a sense of like, if I want to have a spiritual system that defines like what I think about the whole universe, it has to account for everything. And the only way I feel like it can account for everything is that we are just as much the cog as we are the machine, and that like we are all participating in it. We're not just like victims to a reality. It's like we are the reality as well. And it's just that feedback loop.
Well, I think that's a great way to put it, man. I guess we'll leave it here, Max. Thank you so much for coming on. And also, you had some. I feel like you did all the work here today, man.
Sorry.
I honestly feel like you got it figured out.
I'm still learning. There's like, I don't like, and the thing is like, in 100 years, something could happen that changes our scope of like what we understand about the world. Like, even like very spiritually progressive views now. Maybe even in like 30 years, some happens where we're like, oh yeah, we were all totally wrong, you know?
Right. And that's more likely than that not happening.
Exactly.
But another thing too, man, is like, I agree with you on so many things. And again, whatever, they're kind of heady concepts, but I think that a lot of people agree with that. And yet we don't have a way, and I don't even necessarily think we should, but we don't have a way to codify all of those things.
Yeah.
And say like, look, man, we are, it's not like everything's written out in a book, but we're all the children of God. And, sometimes I wonder, like I was saying at the beginning, like the American materially obsessed hedonistic lifestyle, it seems like it's coming, I don't know. I mean, technology is going to keep churning things out as quickly as capitalism will allow it. And, but at some point it has to bounce back. Yeah. And I think at that, when that happens, and again, it might be 10,000 years from now, or it could be next year. I don't know. When that happens, I think we will all discover that we have a lot more in common about how we now conceive about what life is than we thought we did.
Yeah.
And because we don't all go to church together on Sunday, and that's another reason why I like having these conversations, because I do think we have a lot more in common than we generally think we do.
Absolutely.
And you know, in a world that's so individualized and you get all your answers from the television, so there's no need to go ask your neighbor how they feel. Aren't we looking for something to kind of bring us back together?
Yeah. And I think the only My only problem with that in the long run is I don't believe any type of firm spiritual foundation can be taught to you by anyone except your own life experience.
Dude, another completely agree. Like Ram Dass always said that like no rule book is good enough for you.
Yeah,
You're never going to
exactly.
find a book that's like, okay, on Tuesday you should do this, and when that guy pisses you off at work, you should do this. There's
Right.
never ever going to be any book that could ever be specialized enough to be good enough for you or any other person. And that the spiritual path is incredibly personal.
Mhm.
And so, and yeah, I do kind of believe in like the levels of beings. People aren't in a spot to understand X, Y, and Z. I consider myself to be pretty low on the totem pole,
Yeah.
if a totem pole does exist. But that is true too. It's like as much as you can go to lectures and you can read a billion things, and people go to church for 50 years and they go out and act like the same asshole they would if they didn't go to church. You know? But to that extent, yeah, it's not something that can be forced.
Mhm.
But you know, there is something to be said for at least being discussing where you're at on the path, where somebody else is at,
Right.
and maybe there are some little helpful things along the way that could, you know, we do impact one another. So, you know, I think maybe we can help each other take a couple steps forward. But yeah,
Absolutely.
you know, the idea of like I'm very pessimistic about the idea of like a 21st century religion emerging that everybody's going to be like, oh, that's it. You know,
Yeah.
that sounds bad. It sounds like they tried that before and it didn't go
Yeah.
well.
People keep trying it. It's like, have you not learned the lesson? All right.
That's true. Have you seen documentaries, right?
Yeah.
Those things go out of hand fast. Well, listen, if you don't listen to Don't Quit Your Day Job, you should be, particularly episode 19, folks. There's some fantastic stories in there.
It's a good one. You
and
get to
really,
listen to my mom cry. It's excellent.
oh, come on.
I don't edit anything out, but it's good. It's good. Yeah. It would mean a lot if you guys checked it out. But
and of course, now I see that you and our dear friend Alex Richards are about to be live on Twitch at 9. Is this true?
Yep, in 1 hour from now. Yep, and we will be.
So
it'll be on Bedstuy Bedguy, BEDSTUY BEDGUY, and we're fixing the political compass, which is fun.
That's right. And for anybody who tuned in or is tuning on Twitch now, I broadcast the Bedstuy Bedguy channel on ours, so you can stay here or you can go there. Can you just explain real quick what the Political Compass show is? Because I've seen a couple episodes and I think it's such a good idea, man. You can get yourself in a lot of trouble, but I also think it's a great idea.
There's some episodes that I'm like, we shouldn't be doing this.
Why am I doing it?
It's actually, it wasn't my idea. It was 100% Alex Richards' idea. And the first thing he wanted to do is, everyone knows the Political Compass. It's like authoritarian, libertarian, liberal, conservative, or
Yes.
And he was like, what if it would be fun to erase the axes on that and make it something else, but we still rank political stuff on that chart. So like the very first episode was historical figures, empathy versus gaydar. Like, how good was their gaydar and how empathetic they were. We did one that I really liked that was oh man, I can never remember all the axes pairings, but one for example, we did one called Corporate Hellscape, where we where we ranked corporations on if they are more exclamation point or more question mark. That was one of the axes. But tonight we're doing political betrayals from history, and if they are more Scorsese or more Marvel, and if they are hot or sad.
I did see that Alex had in his Instagram story if when Brutus betrayed Caesar, was that hot or sad? And I said
it's gonna be a hot one.
I said hot. Yeah, I thought that's pretty fucking hot, dude.
It's gonna be a hot one. So yeah, definitely tune into that. It's the dumbest thing ever, but it's so much fun to do.
It was a great. The episode that I was watching was whether it was more like I think it was like historical dynasties, and whether they were more like Mad TV or more like SNL.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was Mad TV, SNL, and then like I think it was Burley or Dandy. That was like one axis, but we hated that one because it was just like this seems kind of homophobic. Like, we
Yeah,
don't.
you guys are upset.
But the Mad TV versus SNL, very fun to rank things on that spectrum.
Yeah, that's very, because everything applies to that dichotomy, in my opinion. All right, so go and check that out, Maxim. We can chat a little bit after while in the broadcast here. Thank you for tuning in for Content. Mike and I will be back on Sunday morning, of course, as always. You can check us out on YouTube, Spotify, podcasts, all that stuff. So yeah, we'll talk to you soon.